Hey, good morning. I want to start with a quick question for you here today. So I'm curious, how many of you, as a result of last week, you're just killing it with peace and rest this week. I mean, you just have crushed it, right? I mean, you nailed it. You've been posting about it all week, about how much rest and how much peace you got. I mean, you heard Pastor Mark last week, and you were like, I got it, and you're just nailing it, right? Anybody doing that? Well, that's too bad. I was kind of hoping maybe somebody could come up here and talk about that then here today. So I had COVID this last week. That was fun. I got out of quarantine last night. So if you don't see me moving around here, it's because I just want to be careful and wear a mask around here and all this. So that was right. So I got some rest a little bit this week as that took care of it. But I'm just kind of curious, how many of you even remember, because things have gone so well for you this week, you don't even remember what it's like to have stress. I mean, it's just been going so well. You're just getting an A+ in stress and all these kinds of things. So here we're going to talk about that today because I don't know if you know, but in our society, 77% of everyone, male and female, say that they're now experiencing some physical symptoms associated with stress. Physical symptoms associated with stress. And we're going to kind of go on this, and I know you feel stressed because you're overscheduled and overcommitted and you have a lot going on, but now there's physical symptoms that are showing up, and 77% of us are saying that this is something that there's on this continuum of mental health. And I know you don't say it's mental health because you're just like, and depending on which generation you grew up in, you're like, I'm fine, right? You have that, but there are now physical symptoms that go. And so this sudden sense of stress that comes on, this tightness of chest, this anxiety, these sleepless nights, the racing of the mind, every time a commercial comes on, you have to reach for your phone, right? Because you're like, oh, here's my break. And I mean, it's like, it's like, I got to have a quick smoke. Let me just look, right? And so you do that. And those are all the signs and symptoms that are beginning to come a part of this. And most people, when they were pressed and they said, what is the factor? What is the reason? What's the rationale that's causing all of the stress in your life? The number one answer to that was work. So I thought, hey, it's church. Why don't we talk about this? Why don't we talk about this today? Because Jesus says this in John chapter 14, verse 27. He says this. He says, peace I leave you. So it's like a gift. He's like, I'm giving you peace. I want you to have peace. And he says, and my peace, I'm going to give the peace that I have found through God in the Father. I'm going to give this to you. And it's not the way that the world gives out peace, but do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not be afraid. So these are words of Jesus, which means they're not optional. They're not things that you can kind of think about doing or not doing. So then my question is, if Jesus says this, and Jesus promises this, and Jesus gives this, then why are we still walking around with so much stress? Because when I did my very unofficial survey to start this here today, nobody said they were just crushing it, not a care in the world. So why are we still feeling some of the weights of this? And I'm going to start first. I just want to kind of start first with a story myself, and I've not told this story publicly. In fact, many have no idea about some of this, but several years ago, like over a decade ago, I had a real edge to my life, and my life started showing some cracks. Do you know what I mean by cracks? When cracks are like when you go to work and you're frustrated at work and all the problems at work are somebody else's problem, right? It's their fault and there's incompetence all around you and all these kinds of things. And whenever you start to look and blame everybody else, you need to kind of know those are some cracks that are starting to show up in your life. And so there were some cracks showing up in my life. And then my daughter is diagnosed with a terminal disease. And that doesn't help the cracks in your life. And then she passes. And I'll be honest. Life was a lot harder than I gave it credit for. I knew parenting would be hard. I kind of knew that. And I also knew that parenting would bring out the best and the worst in me. And I knew that it would kind of do that. And I think I've told you this story before. Graham, our oldest, when he was a toddler, he undid an entire roll of toilet paper and put it in the toilet and then flushed it. Right after I had just finished our basement. And the drywall that I had taped and mudded and sanded and painted had water rushing through. And I remember sending him upstairs, and he goes upstairs to our breakfast counter, and then he pushes back and falls back and snaps a chair on the same day. And I remember just shaking, like I didn't even have words to say, because I was just so mad. I was shaking, and I knew that he's a toddler, and yet, you still should know, right? But I remember watching all that. But what happened in my life, and I was not prepared to deal with it or face it, is there were cracks in my life. There was an unsettled edge to me. And to be honest, I was lost. And I was blaming everybody for everything. When you tell a toddler that, how did you not know that was going to happen? Probably means you've got some cracks in your life for this. And so I went through this season where I'm trying to find meaning, and I learned something in this season of my life, and I wish I would have learned it so much earlier, because I learned it the hard way. I found that it's better to surrender than find meaning. Because meaning always follows surrender. But if you're searching for meaning, you're probably not going to find it. But we all want a life of meaning, and to do that, we have to kind of yield or surrender our life to the current realities of what we have. And so I just didn't know that. I didn't know that, so I just kept going on a truth quest and a meaning search, and more cracks started to show. We moved to South Carolina, and while we were at South Carolina, I had to let go of a beloved staff member. Had to terminate his employment, and so that was very, very hard. And then the entire church has a gathering, a meeting, like an all-church meeting. Have you ever been to one of those? Don't. Just don't. And so they decided they were going to air their grievances. So I'm sitting on the platform in my early 30s and sitting on the platform. And it was like for over an hour. And people just like they aired grievances. And in 1978, this church, and I was like, 1978, I was one, right? I realized it wasn't all directed at me, but this was just an opportunity for like a church to vomit, right? And so they did. And boy, did they. And I remember sitting up in that moment going, okay, I think I'm okay, and people just need to grieve and process, and they're processing, and it was bad, and it was ugly, and all these kinds of things were there. It was a real mudslinging fest, and I think I'm managing all of this pretty well. All of these issues in my life, because a lot of them, it felt like, didn't have a lot to do with me. And so over the next year, I wake up in the middle of the night. And I wake up Erin and I go, Erin, I'm having a heart attack. She goes, you think? Yeah. Arms numb, chest. I got all of the things. So we had somebody watch Graham come over, and Erin takes me to the ER. And I'm in ER, and they run a bunch of tests on me, and they say, you're not having a heart attack. To which I said, check again, because I think I'm having a heart attack. And they said, well, you're not having a heart attack. I said, okay. Well, then what is it? And I'm embarrassed, right? It's only taken me, 10, 15 years to talk about this? So now I don't care. So, and I said, what is it? And they said, we think you're having a panic attack. No, I'm not having a panic attack. I'm not having a panic attack. I don't do that. It's not even in my family, right? So we don't have that. And I found out that the cracks in my life weren't going away. Winston Churchill, who once said this, he says, if you're walking through hell, right, if you're walking through hell, keep going, because eventually the darkness will lift. And I'll never forget it. This moment in my life, it only happened once. It's only happened once in my life, in the middle of the night, and my chest is pounding out of my chest, my arm, all these kinds of things have this, and I have this expression, and I find out in this moment that there's this thing that can happen in us mentally where irrationality controls our thinking. And when our bodies are responding like we're at gunpoint, when our bodies begin to respond like we're being held at gunpoint, when your heart begins to beat out of your chest, and when you begin to feel like you're dying, and we go to the hospital and all that, it's basically our body saying we can no longer contain the inner and emotional strain of what we've been carrying. And I had for several years been telling myself that I was good and I was okay. And so all of a sudden in this moment, it was like, time out. I'm done. I'm done. And in that night, it just kind of all came to a head, and that fight or flight response kind of kicks in, and it just, I just kind of subdued it, and I'm just laying in bed, and I just kind of pray, and I go, God, I think we're going to need a game plan because I don't think I'm okay. I don't think I'm there. And if you're a business person and you're, business on those kinds of things, give me a field guide for whatever we're dealing with, and we'll get through this, we'll solve it. And I kind of needed a field guide for fear. And so, over the next 7 to 8 years after that moment, God has shown me that in this world there are emotional rhythms to our life. There's a rhythm in our life. And when we violate that, they kind of all become connected. And so we have this, spiritual rhythm, your emotional rhythm, your spiritual rhythm, your health rhythms, and there's all these connected things. And so we can begin to spiral in one direction. But if we claim that God is at the helm of our lives, and if God is leading our lives, then what we do and how we respond with our bodies is of paramount, and which is why we started, and Pastor Mark did a great job last week, and which is why we're going to look over the next few weeks, and this is why we said, hey, why don't we try a book? And you were like, a book? And then you started reading it, and you're like, I don't know if I want to get into all that. And now today I'm like, I think we probably should, and you're still going, okay, I get that, it's okay. Because God created rhythms when he created creation. There were rhythms to it. God created in days, and then he created in nights. And whether you think those are literal and actual and divided in time sequencing or not, it doesn't matter. There's just a rhythm. There's a cadence that God begins to do in creation that has little to do with the actual chronology of time, but more the kairos of time, where we begin to see that there is a rhythm and a pattern and a sustainable motion that God begins to do his work in. And so he creates these in evening and morning, and he begins to divide the world into these rhythms of evening and morning and evening and morning and moon and stars, and he begins to do this. And all of a sudden, he creates down to the seasons, and he begins to create the months and the years, and we begin to see this whole system of rhythms and cadences. And then ultimately, this culminates in humanity, right? You and me. And so then, even in our bodies operate in rhythm. And then with the rhythm of creation, we have a heartbeat, which is in a rhythm. If your heart gets out of beat, you have arrhythmia, right? Then they're going to shock you, or, some of you have had that. You know what that's like. Our pulse, our breathing. Ladies, labor pain. And these rhythms and these cadence are the boundaries for which we create our life. And when we stay within those rhythms, and when we stay within those boundaries, and we stay within those cadences, we are governed by peace. But when we get out of the constraints of those rhythms, sudden chaos can assume over time. And our minds and our bodies begin to pay the price for us getting out of those rhythms. And not just our minds and our bodies, but here's the thing that we don't really talk about hardly at all. Our family and our friends also pay the price for us getting out of those rhythms. Our work pays the price. And ultimately, where that ends, it ends in confession. It ends in confession of all the things that we broke while pretending to be okay. So, these are the 4 rhythms, and if you have the book, you have it, and we're having difficulties with shipping on Amazon, so I think we have like 20 today, right? So we'll get you there, or you can use Amazon and just get it yourself, that'd be great. So we found this book where it begins to talk about this rest, restore, connect, and create, the four kind of sustained emotional, spiritual, relational, and vocational health rhythms that we think are important. And so one of the things we have to do is we have to examine and confess, these are the things that I've broken in me and in others as a result of me being out of rhythm, out of the cracks that show up in my life. And usually you can find there's a crack in your life by the way you react and respond to something. And so it's not optimal to God. It's not optional to God. Rest is not like an optional thing that God gave us that maybe, if you get time for rest, you should do this. That's not how it is at all, because God begins to bless the day, and he blesses the day, and you don't earn the blessing. Like, you don't run hard all day to receive a reward. You don't earn your rest. Right? Now, I know your employer says if you work for X amount of days, then we'll give you 1 day. That's not how your bodies were designed. And I'm not here to, attack your employer and all this kind of stuff. We have the same setup here. That's not my angle. That's not my issue. We don't work to earn rest. We rest so that we can work. There's nothing inherently wrong with work. In fact, we were designed and created to work. We weren't designed and created to sit still. We'll get to that in just a second, right? So here's how this works. We created our weekly rhythms. Today is the first day of the week. So this is a Sabbath day, and this is how the Hebrews begin to talk about this. This is a Sabbath, and you rest on the Sabbath so that you're in abundant overflow of rest so that then you can go out and live out of your abundance, right? So you filled up your tank with rest on Sabbath, on a Sabbath day, and then you go live out of that abundance throughout the thing. But when you get out, we live in a culture that's so out of rhythm and so out of it that people are never replenished. And they're living out of a deficit. And the deficit will always produce cracks in your life. And those cracks will ultimately lead you, if you don't deal with it, to a situation where you ultimately will have to confess for the things that you broke because you violated the rhythms that God created in your life. And so you burn out. You burn out God. God even commanded, this is so great, in the Hebrews in the Old Testament, they talked about this, that every 7 years, there was a commandment in the Old Testament that every 7 years they had to rest the land. Farmers still use this today. They did this. So here's what happens. Guess what? The Hebrew people, and you're not going to believe this, in the Old Testament, they didn't obey. I know. That's crazy. And so after 70 cycles of 70, they just said, you know what? We need the crops to produce crops every year. Forget the rest thing. We don't have time for rest. There's no productivity in rest. So God exiles his people from the land for 70 years. So they do 70 cycles of 7. So 490 years they violate resting the land. And God's like, you just don't get it. You're out of here for 70 years. And we think it's like a punishment. Oh, screwed up. God slapped me on the hand. He's so not happy. No, this is the culmination of God going, no, I mean what I say, right? And I say what I mean. And I created the world in such a way that it requires rest and restoration. And to restore the land, you have to not use it. And I would certainly expect that you have kind of looked at this the same, and you've said, I can't afford a Sabbath because here's what we do. We get into self-talk and we say, if I avoid the Sabbath, when is my lawn going to get mowed, right? When am I going to have time to get groceries? When am I going to have time to fill in the blank? And so we've rationalized and encouraged one another to violate the rhythms that God has had. And as a result, there are some cracks that we have in our life. And they may not culminate in an issue today, but I promise you at some point, you will find yourself in a situation that you did not expect or experience. So other things that happen when we kind of violate this initial thing is we lose our passion for what we once had. My guess is there's a lot of things you were really passionate about when you were younger or in your 20s or in your 30s or 40s or 50s, and now it's just not. And usually it's because your passions usually get filled during your rest time when you're rested, but when we kind of take all that time away, we kind of get out of rhythm. And so we don't even like believe in the circadian rhythm anymore, right? Thomas Edison, when he developed the light bulb, we were like, hey, forget this. We can be way more productive with light bulbs, right? And so we've kind of gotten out of the things. And so here's the thing that God even wired into the fabric of creation. The problem is the sunrise, not your phone, the sunrise gives off blue light. It wakes you up. Now, some of us have purchased blue light glasses to filter out the blue light, so we're like, oh, I don't want that at night, but I still have to look at something that's sparkly and shiny, right? Either on a TV or on your phone. And so I must do that, but I don't want all the effects of the blue light because I don't want to overstimulate my mind, so I'll get some blue light things. And so in our sunrise produces blue light, which says wake up. And the sunset produces red light, which induces melatonin, which says night, night, right? And so what we've done is we've said, you know what, I can't begin to do this. And there's a great TED Talk on this, because what happens is the nature of us being outside and in that rhythm creates a cycle, and that cycle actually produces rest. And some of you have been so paralyzed because you can't get your mind to stop racing that you've never even given yourself a chance to sleep. Now, when you don't sleep, you may not know this, or you may know this, and now you have language for it, is the brain is the boss of your body. Okay, it's the boss. And when you can't sleep, so let's say you only slept 3 hours last night, right? Well, guess who's going to take all of that energy that you gained in 3 hours? The boss. Your brain's always going to take the amount of rest that you got. So if you're feeling sluggish all day, it's because your brain took all the energy that you got in your massive 3 hours of sleep and then your 5 hours of tossing and turning, right? And so the boss says, I'm going to take all that energy and I'm going to use that. So whatever reserves you got last night are going to go there first. And then your mind keeps going, right? It's going to keep going, but your body is going to start to lag behind. And so this is why it's so important for us to kind of think about this in such different terms. And why am I so sluggish? And this is why no amount of caffeine or sugar can overcome that, right? So for us, I want to lead us into the part that we want to deal with today. And we want to get into restore. Okay? Like restoring our physical health, our emotional health. And part of that is just, eat something that grows on a plant rather than something that was made in a plant, right? And this is a part of the transformational cycle that's going to be a part of this, because we've got to kind of get back, and I think the book does a good job of this in Rebecca's own life. She begins to talk about this, but getting back to like gardening, right? So Emerson and I planted a garden this year. We got tomatoes, we got cucumbers, we have rabbits, we have lettuce, celery, and basil, which I'm not sure why we picked that, but it'll be great for whatever you use that for. So, and we've got these things just to kind of walk, and every morning it's a great time for us to kind of go out and look at it. And the first time we've tried it, and it's been fun for her, and I had to kind of go out in the morning to begin to go and look at this. And so far we've only had lettuce, so we made a taco salad out of that. And then, yeah, I know we're not all the way there, but hey, baby steps, right? We're up baby steps. Maybe we'll have a tomato with it one day too. And so we're trying to figure out like ways that we can begin to go, like there's a different way for us to begin to kind of promise this. And so the other thing too is just exercise, right? Scholars calculated, I love this, scholars calculated that they believe Jesus walked 3,300 miles in his 3 years of ministry based off of the places that he went that are referenced in the New Testament. And because Jesus invited all those with him to follow me, he meant like literally walk with me. So here's the stats. The average person, now I know you're above average, but the average person sits 9.3 hours of the day. I know, you got to figure it out. And is that right? No, I know. Well, does dinner count? Right? Well, how about my car? Oh, well, yeah, it doesn't look good, does it? The average person spends 9.3 hours a day sitting, and they spend about 7 hours sleeping, which results in, do the math, a lot of inactivity for our bodies. And so there's a lot of cascading issues that are the reason that some of you have been in a funk, right? Because not only does lack of exercise, help us become more susceptible to heart disease and diabetes and other things that happen from a lethargic lifestyle, it also shuts down our brains and limits our growth. And I think it's interesting that some of the most innovative people in history, from Steve Jobs to Charles Dickens, they walked. They would do walking meetings, and they would walk to meetings, and they processed, and they did their best thinking and gave their best advice while moving and walking. Charles Dickens would walk 20 miles every day just to de-stress his mind so that it can prepare himself for composition, which I think is a fun way to say writing, but that was his word. Google has even incorporated walking meetings into its work days, and employees can reserve a time that they want to meet on the indoor track to begin to walk and meet while they're beginning to do this, because they're beginning to go, there's a science behind us moving and restoring our bodies, and to begin to restore our bodies. But the point is, we have to move. We have to move. We have to rest. We have to be restored so that we can begin to have spiritual health and physical health and emotional health. And we have faith. And so when we feel the tension that rises from the inside, and so there's stress and there's all this stuff coming in, these are inward, rest and restore, inward moving things. Next week we'll get to some other stuff as we begin to go. But God has said this in his word, and we're going to get this into Psalm 51 right now. He says, even when we're tempted to fear, and you can put anxiety or whatever it is in there, even when you're tempted to fear, God has promised that he will always provide in escape, that you may be able to bear it. And you'll be carriers of the shining light, even if it's in fragile jars of clay. And when you begin to just start with rest that Mark talked about, and restoring what you eat, how you work, reducing your blue light, not slogging away your life, God will restore. But you're going to have to leave some things dormant for a while. Because these rhythms that were created even in the very fabric of our universe were designed to keep you healthy. And when we violate those for good reason, it creates cracks in your life, and you do and you say stuff that you go and you say this, I don't know where that came from. I don't know why I did that. What was I thinking? David said this after the cracks of his life just kind of exploded. David said, this is what I need from you, God. Psalm 51. He said, God, please create in me a pure heart. Can you renew and rejuvenate a steadfast spirit within me? And don't cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. But maybe this is the verse you need this week. God, can you restore the joy? Can you restore the joy? Isn't that what you want even more than sleep? Wouldn't you like to enjoy? Joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. So here's some takeaways that I want to leave with this week, and we have them on here, and we'll put them on social media so you don't have to hurt yourself trying to write these all down right now. But here's some promises that I just want to leave you with here today. Here's some takeaways. You can read these while you walk, while you exercise this week, while you get up, right? I want you to think of this. I just want you to remember a few things, because when you begin to forget these things, the cracks are going to grow. 1, you are a child of God. Doesn't matter what anybody else says about you, that's who you are. You are a new creation. You're a friend of Jesus. You are created by God to do good. You're free in Christ. You are chosen. You've been picked. You are loved. You are the light of the world. You are not ruled by fear. You have been forgiven. You're God's possession. You're free from the desires of the flesh. You are a light in the world too. You are secure in him, and you are loved by God. Isaiah writes it this way in the Message, and I want to leave you with this. I'll give you a full life. And some of you are in this place. You're in the emptiest of places. Even if you're there, I will give you firm muscles and strong bones, and you'll be like a well-watered garden, a gurgling spring that never runs dry. You'll use the old rubble of the past life to build anew. You're going to rebuild the foundations from out of your past. You'll be known as those who can fix anything, restore old ruins, rebuild and renovate, make the community livable again. Today, as we close the service, as we always do, I want to make sure you know that these response stations are available and open to you. You can use them. You're not required to use them. They're optional. But we've found people telling how useful they become in their own life and their own rhythms of their own life to begin to say, God, this is a dark area of my life. This is a crack. This is a crack. I've noticed this is a crack. I just keep blaming. I keep pointing the finger. I just keep, and God, the crack's in me. And maybe today you want to light a candle and say, God, I need a little bit of light on that crack. I've been trying to hide and cover up that crack for a long time. Maybe today you want to take communion at one of the stations and take it back to your seat and take the body and bread of Christ and say, God, I've just been kind of violating your rhythms under good reason, but I've still been violating your rhythms. And I need to be reminded that what I eat and how I live and how I manage my time and what I look at and how much time, all of it matters. And that some of the things that I've gotten out of order are now showing up, and God, I need you to restore some of that. So let me know what I need to let go of. And finally, you may just want to write. In the back of your seats, or you go up to a cross, and you may just want to write, Dear God. And you may want to pin that to the cross today and go, God, here's a crack. I haven't even want to talk about it. I think I've just been telling myself it's manageable. Maybe for now. But a crack doesn't go away. A crack has to be confessed. A crack has to be healed. And that will only come through intentional change, where we stop being Jesus admirers and Jesus followers. I mean, you just want to write that down. Oh God, pin to the cross, and we'll join you in prayer for that. You can do this in just a second. The ONU team's going to be back out here to sing with you in just a minute, and you'll be able to respond. But can I just pray with you real quick? Oh God, we were running at such a pace, and then the world stopped. And then it opened up. And man, we just started running even harder because we felt like we had to catch up from all the stuff we missed. And we've just been running. And we look like crazy people. The problem is we're starting to act like crazy people. And our actions and our reactions are just not what we wish they were. We're responding to things in ways we wish we hadn't. And it feels like we're just apologizing all the time. And God, what you're trying to say is, hey, there's a rhythm and there's a cadence, and you're not in it. So God, would you invite us during this season to put down our rhythm and join your rhythm? And it'll be one of the ways in which we worship you. We'll worship you through the way that we rhythm our lives to your cadence, not ours. Help us to say no to some things, and help us to say yes to some of the things you're inviting us to do. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks for joining us online today. If you liked what you heard, be sure to hop on over to our YouTube channel where you can like and subscribe to be one of the first to get our content. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.